Hey everyone, today we're taking a look at the SH Figuarts Guts Berserker Armor Heat of Passion. I'm currently reading through the manga of Berserk, but I haven't quite made it to the part where he has this armor yet. I think the armor's a really cool design though, and it looked like a fun figure and seemed like it would pose pretty well. So I wanted to pick it up, and hopefully it's a good time. Here's a look at the package. It's a bit of a tall package. Here's a Jujutsu Kaisen one for comparison. There's some art of Guts here on the front. You can see the figure through the window here a little bit. It's kind of dark, so it says Guts Berserker Armor Heat of Passion here on the window. More art with that same text on the side. More art on the other side. And then on the back there are some poses of the figure. Here he is out of the package. I think he looks a little bit awkward in a neutral stance. It reminds me a little bit of an Amazing Yamaguchi figure, where the proportions are just a little bit weird, and he has all these extra little plates that kind of make it difficult to get him looking decent just standing there. I'll mainly have it posed though, so not a huge deal for me personally. I do think it has a cool silhouette. Looking at some of those details while my cat yells at me. I think the helmet looks good. He has one dark red eye and one bright red eye. There's a lot of lines and texture throughout the armor, and that looks pretty cool. There's lots of little details like these little rivets here. The inside of this mouth is sculpted with some texture, and that looks okay. The jaw is articulated, but I'll show more of that in the articulation. Back of the head has more of that texture and little detail bits. That looks nice. Coming down to the chest, there is a wash over the whole thing, like a pink wash. It looks pretty good on mine. It's relatively consistent. I've seen some others where it's pretty splotchy, so that'll come down to QC. I do like all the sculpt here, all the texturing and the plates of armor. I think that all looks really cool. The waist is another area that reminds me of an Amazing Yamaguchi figure, where once you pose it, it's hard to get these little plates lined up perfectly again. And so he looks a little bit disjointed, just in a neutral pose. And again, we've got more of that texture and wash. I think that looks pretty cool. Coming around to the butt, there are some little straps here, and these are painted brown. The buckles aren't painted. It would have been nice if those were silver or black or something. They kind of get a little bit lost, just being little brown blobs there. These parts underneath the armor, the biceps and the hips, they're a darker black and they have some wrinkles. And those look okay. No paint there, and they're relatively plain, but I think they look decent. If you were to peel away the armor, the bicep is a bit thin, as is the shoulder, kind of to allow for the plates here. More sculpt and texture on the back of the hands and the forearms, and then coming down to the knees and the shins. I just think he looks pretty cool overall. I like all the little line texture. I think it looks nice and it catches the light in a way that's pleasing. The feet, maybe a little flat, but that does allow for them to articulate pretty well. We'll show more of that later. So, yeah, overall, I think it looks pretty cool, but also a little awkward just standing here in a neutral stance. I think it really needs to be posed to bring out the full potential of this figure. Again, I haven't made it here in the manga yet, so I'm not 100% if the proportions are entirely accurate or not. We'll say his arms probably a little bit too long. And he does look a bit thin compared to Guts where I am currently, but perhaps he gets a bit more thin once he gets this armor. I don't know. This brings us to the articulation. I think much like an Amazing Yamaguchi figure, this figure looks much better when posed, and so far I've been able to get it in most of the poses I want. The head will move up this much before the armor bumps into the back there. Pretty decent range. You can hinge the head open more, So that's pretty good range looking up overall. As I said, this does hinge up and down. On the top, the jaw also hinges open. If you go past where it's sculpted on this jaw, it looks a little bit weird. And then sometimes if it's closed all the way, depending on the angle, this little jaw sticking out can look a little bit funky, but usually I found it kind of blends into the rest and it looks alright. So looking down, look down about this much before the mouth bumps into this little armor bit. And then the neck is also on a ball peg there, so you can get him looking around pretty much however you'd like. So that's pretty good. At the shoulders, there's some separate armor pieces here. This is like a little floating armor piece, and then this is a separate armor piece. So moving the shoulders up, get about that much range before things start clashing into each other. There is full rotation here, so all the armor doesn't really get in the way of that. This little armor piece is attached at a point on the front and the back, so it can kind of shift around as you need. In this one, feels like it's on a little ball peg, so it can kind of shift forward and back, and then this little piece will hinge in and out, so it shouldn't get in the way too much. There is a bicep swivel, a double jointed elbow. It gets about this much range before things start to bump into each other. A little bit less range if this is lined up perfectly, but if you scooch it out of the way, you can squeak out a little bit more range. Then at the wrist there are ball hinges, and the armor doesn't really get in the way of those. They're pretty snug, which will help with holding up the sword. Cat's crinkling some paper. We'll wait. Wow, she's really going to town.
I know.
At the waist, you can bend back about this much. Not the most range, despite having all these armor plates. These are kind of soft, but yeah, they just kind of clash into each other in the back here, and it's still pretty good range. And then if you need more, you can rotate him back at the hips a little bit. Leaning forward. Lean forward about this much. So pretty good range forward. And then you can also rotate him a little bit more at the hips to really get him looking down all the way. And there is side to side tilt. Good range on the tilts. And you can rotate that all around. There's like a super tight ball joint at the top, and then a less tight one at the bottom here. It's pretty hard to move the one at the top, so maybe if that was a little less squeaky, there could be more range, but right now that's what I'm getting out of it. For the hips, these move out this much, so just about the full splits, not quite. I think that'll be pretty good. You can kick forward this much, and then if you angle the leg out a bit, it can kick forward all the way, but then it does put it at an angle. You can kick back this much. Pretty good range going back overall. And again, if you angle it out, you can kick out more. Double jointed knees. Pretty good range there. There are the interchangeable legs. You're supposed to be able to pop off at the hip. Every time I've tried it, the whole leg just pops off so far. I'm going to need to heat it up and see if I can get the leg swapped out. There is a thigh swivel. That's supposed to be where you can pop the leg off. And then at the ankle, there's a little ball joint at the top of the ankle there, where you can move it around. And then a hinge, so the foot can go forward pretty much all the way. Back also very far. There's an ankle rocker that gets pretty good range. And there is a toe hinge. Relatively stiff toe hinge, so I think that'll work out pretty well. A little bit loose near the bottom going down this way, but When you reach this point on mine, it's a little stiffer, so I think that should hold it pretty well. So, all that's to say, there's pretty good articulation on this figure. You can get him into a lot of fun poses. A lot of dynamic, like Spider-Man poses if you want to. Those are fun. You can really just contort him up and get a lot of fun agile poses. So I've been having a good time with the brief amount of posing I've been doing. Look at that. Now the question is, can he hold his sword up? So the first accessory that we'll go over is the sword. It's a bit more like a big slab of iron, to be honest. And this has a removable pommel, so then you can slip on the gripping hands. I've already got a gripping hand slipped on there. And you can pop that back on, whichever way you'd like. It is hefty though. It looks nice. It's maybe a little too clean, but it does have this nice texture in the dark parts, and then a bright shiny silver for the edges. It should maybe be a little bit more beat up. It's got the little chain loop bit there, the chunky pommel. The grip looks nice. It's just kind of a white plastic, not really a wash or anything on there, but it does look nice. And there he is holding the sword, and he holds it pretty well. And you can hold it up with one arm. You can see with me flipping it around, it will dip down a bit, but it is a bit of a heavy sword. But he can hold it up, and I've had him posed holding it up for a while, and he does alright. So that's good. And the hinge is pretty stiff. So with that wrist hinge, you can hinge it up a bit. And it holds it okay. And you can hinge it down. Still holds it okay. There is like a slight amount of balancing required. If you can't hold it like horizontally, because then it'll floop over just because of the weight on the side. But if you get him holding it up and down, holds it pretty well. So I'm happy with that. For the rest of the accessories, he has these two faceplates, and these will go on the alternate heads. Both of these are painted well. He's got the one neutral face and the angry face with some black tendrils on the cheeks. These both look nice. You can see the scars sculpted in there. The eyes are painted nicely. There's a bit of a different color for the lips and around the cheeks. The teeth on the angry face are pretty clean. Overall, I like these. Along with that, there are alternate heads. So here's the doggo head with the neutral face in it. And that looks pretty nice. There's also an alternate collar piece here that just pegs in. So with this head, you can look up this much, a little bit more range there. And then down, you kind of have to finagle the earpieces over that jaw. And down that much before he bumps into the bottom part of the jaw. The connection for this head is a little bit looser. Like if you move it back a little bit too rough, it just pops out. So I don't love that, but I'll probably be displaying it with the first head I showed anyway. The back of the neck here is articulated, so this hinges a little bit to get out of the way. And then here's the Skull Knight head with the angry face. You can see the nose kind of slots into the little Skellyman nose hole there. And another alternate collar piece for this. Looking up, you can look up this much, and then down about that much before he bumps into the collar. This one's pretty cool. Again, a little bit loose on that peg. Doesn't hold quite as well as the default head. I like this head the best, followed by the skull head, and then the open face doggo head. I'll probably keep this head on him most of the time, but it's cool to have the Skull Knight head as an alternative. Then for hands, there are the neutral hands that come on him in the package, a set of gripping hands for holding the sword, a set of claw hands, a set of fists, and one cannon hand. The little robot hand is on a hinge, so this hinges a little bit, and then you got the regular hinge. I don't really know why he's got the two-hand situation here. I would assume that it's like a living armor sort of thing, so that the armor encompasses the robot hand, and then when he goes to use the cannon, the living armor hand floops up, cannon hand floops down. But I don't actually know. I haven't made it there yet. That's just what I'm guessing from this being kind of like thin and shriveled and just making assumptions. And then finally a set of crouching legs. So even though he gets pretty good articulation with the knees already, this is more extreme. Like I said, I haven't been able to pop these off yet. Let's see if I can do it right now. Oh, I did it. Okay. And then, oh, there's some black paint in there. That is wet paint. Please hold. Alright, so I guess watch out for some wet paint potential. I wash my hands just so I don't get paint on the rest of it. And we'll pop this on. Oh, the hip popped off. Oh no. Hold on. Let me do this off camera. Okay, this popped in pretty easily off camera. There is a little hinged armor piece above the hip. So if your hip pops off, try to make sure that's in there. And that fills the gap here. Okay, so that it was relatively easy off camera, just hard to do with my arms all extended in front of me. And then we gotta pop the foot off as well. Let's see how that goes. Oh, it might be a struggle. I'll put some heat on it. I don't want to break it. Okay, I just hit it for a couple seconds with a hairdryer, just so it would pop out a little bit easier, just because I didn't want to risk breaking it. But then it popped into this leg pretty easily. So there's the alternate leg, so you can get that crouched, really bent knee pose. Here is compared to the other one. So I think that's pretty cool. It's not something they had to include, but it's nice to have. A little bit finicky trying to get it swapped out. Hopefully swapping it back will be okay. Let's see. Maybe just the initial swap is tough. Yeah, so swapping it back, no problems there. It might just be some paint in there or just tightness in the joints to get it swapped initially. I don't know if I'll swap those a ton, maybe for a picture or two, but I think it poses well enough that I won't need the super crouched legs all the time. Yeah, those are fine. Let's swap the foot as well, just so we can see. Ooh. Such a tiny peg. I just get nervous that I'm going to break it. And there. Easy peasy. So, if it's giving you any trouble, just try to use a hairdryer or put in some hot water or something. Overall, a pretty good spread of accessories. I'm pretty happy with those. Let's try to get him in a two-handed sword pose and see how that goes. I don't know if there are any other accessories that would have been good to include. As I've said, I haven't made it here yet. But I like the ones that it came with. I think they're pretty cool. Even though I may not use the alternate heads a ton, it's nice to have options. Okay, there he is in a two-handed sword pose. He does that pretty well. You can get the arms bent out forward. And now let's see if we can do a horizontal sword pose with the two hands. Yeah. Okay. Watch out. So you can get a horizontal sword pose. Yeah, and he can hold it up by himself. I almost forgot with all the leg swapping business. The final accessory is his cape. This is It's like a... well, I don't even know what kind of fabric it is. It's kind of papery feeling almost, but it's got a cool print on it. And then there's a wire that comes down along the sides and then kind of squiggles on the bottom and also loops up through the center here. So then because of that, you can kind of crinkle it however you want and it'll hold its shape throughout. And that's pretty cool. And then we'll pop it on him. And it helps hide some of the like awkwardness of it, like the skinniness in the center, or just any of that Yamaguchi-esque weirdness in a neutral pose. But then when you get him in an action pose, let's do it over the head sword situation. And then you can just crumple the cape wherever and it gives it like a nice dynamic feel. This isn't a great pose, but you get the point. Like it just gives it a nice flow and a sense of movement. And it just looks nice. I like it. So I think that's a good accessory. I'm happy with that. I think it looks cool. The edges are all tattered. Those look nice. It poses well. I like the way they did the wire through the middle, so it's not just... a lot of capes it's just a wire along the edges, sometimes along the bottom. I think this helps getting into whatever pose you want. So yeah, overall with the accessories and articulation, I'm happy with it. I've been enjoying getting him into like weird Spider-Man poses with his giant sword. It's just silly, and I like it. For size and comparisons, Guts is standing at about 6.5 inches tall. Here he is next to the Four Horsemen, Figura Obscura Mask of the Red Death, and Thousand Toys Hellboy. Here he is with the SH Figuarts Suguru Geto from Jujutsu Kaisen and Chainsaw Man from Chainsaw Man. Here he is with the Furry Planet Veteran William and Savage Crucible Imperial Sentry. Here he is with the Marvel Legends Nightcrawler and Amazing Yamaguchi Agent Venom. Overall, I'm having fun with this figure. I don't think it's a perfect figure. There are some things that could be a little bit better. The leg swapping could be a little bit easier. If I had to pick between tight joints that are hard to swap or loose ones that are falling off, I prefer the tight ones. And some of the proportions could maybe be a little different, maybe a little more anatomically correct. That being said, I still enjoy it. Like I've been saying, it reminds me most of an Amazing Yamaguchi figure, just with the stylized proportions and the way it poses. If you don't like an Amazing Yamaguchi figure, you might not like this one. And if you like your figures in a neutral pose, you might not like it. If you like a lot of dynamic, agile, actiony poses, I think it's going to be a good time though. I did see that some people had some issues with the consistency of the pink wash over the armor. So maybe if you're thinking about getting it, get it from somewhere that has a decent exchange or return policy, just in case you get a rough one. Mine looks pretty good though. The other downside is this one does cost a bit more than the usual SH Figuarts. I think that may put some off, especially if there's those other aspects you already don't enjoy, like the proportions, the way it poses, whatever. So it's a little difficult to say I would just recommend it outright. It seems like the one that some people may get and not enjoy just because it's not quite what they're expecting. But I think if you like to pose your figures and you like Berserk, you'll enjoy this. I was also pretty surprised that he can hold the sword pretty well, especially with two hands. With one hand, pretty decently as well. So I'm going to keep enjoying this figure. Let me know in the comments if you plan on picking it up or what your experiences with it have been if you got it. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and I'll see you next time.